you know that the third most common reason why a startup fails is because of the lack of a strong team? Sometimes, as a startup founder, the list of things that are important that you need to focus on feels like it's never ending. From looking for investments, for funding, product market fit, customers, and more. Yes, it's really important to find a team, but how many founders out there are intentional about planning for their teams, the team's growth, and for the future? Sometimes it feels even a luxury to have one or two people interested in what you want to do or wants to help. That's this aspect of planning for the team and making sure that you have a great founding team could be something that we are tempted to leave on the side. Today, when we looked at the startup dilemmas, we've decided to focus on this question that we've seen a lot on social media, and people have approached us to ask us, how do we create a strong team? We are going to look at three key aspects: solo founder versus co-founder. This is a question that comes up time and time again, and I will share with you my thoughts on that. We look at the founding team, and also, why not? We have some quick fire questions that we've picked up online that we will also look at when it comes to making up a team. Welcome to the Mary Poppins of startups. I'm Naili Makangu from Athena Leaders, an organization that is passionate about helping your startups dream, build, and play whilst leaving behind the legacy of a happy and productive workplace playground. For those who are new to the show, our three key rules. Number one, although it might look like it, this is not a monologue. If you have any questions, any thoughts, or just want to tell us where you are, or advice that you'd like to share with others, please feel free to put them online, #Athena Leaders, and we'll get back to you. Rule number two, if you know anyone who's part of the startup ecosystem, a founder, or anyone who has a great story and tips to share, get them to speak to the Mary Poppins of startups. I love to interview them live on the show. Rule number three, most important one, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Getting a team together. The one thing that I will talk over and over again, and I will mention throughout today's discussion, is about being intentional. Being intentional about creating and building the team, it's just as important as the way you are intentional about developing your product, finding the right customers, finding the product market fit. So when we kind of look into details of what being intentional means, we are going to really start looking at things such as culture, which is something that, especially at the early days where everything feels like a hot potatoes that you have to juggle, culture is not something that is at the top of the founder's mind, yet it's something very, very important. Before we get down to the details of getting the team together, let's first answer our first question of the day: solo founder versus co-founder. Do I really need to have a co-founder? When you have an idea, you have a vision, it's kind of your baby. And there are many teams out there that start as founder, like a solo founder, trying to make headways, but then eventually decide to get a co-founders. Other people are starting by having 2 or 3 people straight from the start, so they start together. Is there something right or wrong? Well, based on my experience and, of course, the feedback I've got from investors and other startups that I'm advising, one of the questions that investors ask a lot to solo founders is, why is it that they don't have a co-founder? For investors, of course, investing in any business ventures is risky, but they see having a co-founder as a way of de-risking what you're doing. They see it as a positive because you've managed to find another person, to find someone who believed in your vision enough that they want to jump on board as a co-founder. So that gives a positive sign to investors and gives more confidence. The second reason why investors like co-founders is especially if the 2 co-founders or 3, they have different skill set and they have different specialism. For them, again, it means that by default, for free, you are bringing in a lot more experience in your team. So, for example, if you are someone who's strong in the technology sector, so you're a CTO and you're a co-founder of someone who's an industry expert, for example, HR, then you can bring them together. So for investors, they see that as such a positive, a bonus that they favor co-founders. Of course, when we start looking at co-founders, especially if you are looking at looking for a co-founder, always go for complementary skills. And we are going to talk about that, complementary skills and personalities, when we start answering the second question. But that's something that's really, really important if you do decide to go for a co-founder. Is there anything wrong with having being a solo founder? Well, I would say no. I am a solo founder of my business and I absolutely enjoy the ride. I'm not going to lie. As saying it's a roller coaster to anyone who's starting a business, they probably know exactly what I'm saying and maybe think that I'm under exaggerating. But the good thing about having a co-founder is that when you go through the roller coaster, especially the lows, then you have someone you can that is also going to the journey with you. Of course, I've got a lot of advisors, friends. I've structured my business to know that if I have a gap here, those are the people I'm going to hit to work together. Yet, if you have a co-founder, they do that naturally for you. So some people see co-founders as a way of having also someone to help on the emotional side. And like I've said, as a solo founder, I can say, yes, you can do that. And of course, the challenges depends on what you are building, what is your business, but it's not a no or yes. So if you are thinking, should I get a co-founder? It really depends on yourself. And as I was advising someone earlier last week, when we looked at this idea of her being a solo founder, a co-founder, or even just someone as a founding team of a startup, we really stopped and went back to look at her values, what she wanted to achieve, look at the challenges of every single block of the one she was considering, and then she made a decision. So there you have it. If you are wondering whether to be a solo founder and co-founder, then really look at your business, how you're structuring that, so the kind of question investors are going to ask. And if you are going down the solo founder route, then how can you answer those questions positively by showing them that you have the support that you need emotionally and on the technical sides behind you, whether it's advisor or founding team and all of that. That will give you the chance to succeed as a solo founder and get the investment that you need to grow. More importantly, when we really start looking at this idea of building a team, if you're bringing a co-founder or not, or even just in the co-founding team, then the key thing to look at is the vision. You want to bring people on board that shares the same vision as you. Remember, building a startup is not like in the movies. It takes time and it takes a lot of hours, a lot of work. In the movies, it's amazing how quickly you go from having nothing to becoming a unicorn, having nothing to have all of the customers and everybody chasing you. What they miss out, or maybe they do display in maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the movie, is the aspects that are not very sexy when it comes to building a business. The times where, it's the thing that I went through myself, in addition to doing your work, you have to spend hours and hours understanding sales and marketing and other skill sets, hours of looking for people, partners, people working for your company or outsourcing, building your ideas, the rejection. So much goes on. And especially when you are building a tech product, and you are not from a tech background, there's another aspect or spectrum of things that you might not even know that makes it challenging as you go along. So the more people that share your vision, the more you know that regardless of the disagreements we'll have, we know that disagreement is positive and beneficial for you to allow you to move forward and move ahead. So that's why it's really important to have a very clear vision, something that you can rely on and the team can rely on. And don't bring anyone in your team that do not share the same vision and the personality that you want for your startup to grow. So for anyone who's had any questions so far, especially if you are just joining the show, please do make sure that you put them in the comments, hashtag Athena Leaders, and I will answer you live, just as I'm answering questions that were asked by other founders on social media. The second big question that we are going to tackle is what makes a great founding team? That's such an amazing question. And this is something that I can talk to you about for an hour, but I promise not to because we're all busy and we have other things to do. So I will start by asking you a question, right? What culture do you want to have in your startup? What do you want your startup to be known for in terms of the way people work and relate to you? How do you want your employee to describe your startup when you are not looking? When you are not looking, which is the most important part. As I've mentioned earlier, it's really important to be intentional about your startup, to be intentional about how you would like your startup to grow and who you are bringing in the team. Yes, it can feel like a catch-22 because at sometimes, hey, I'm lucky to have a friend or someone that I've met online who wants to help, and I might not have to pay them or pay them less or something like that. But if the person that you're bringing is not aligned in terms of the culture, then that could be a red flag because this is a problem that you are creating for the future. This is where the seed of organizational death starts. The reason why it's important to, especially when it comes to the founding team, it could be not just the co-founders, but the first few employees in your startup. You have to bear in mind that what tends to happen naturally in startup is that the first few people will eventually get leadership positions. And if you have someone who might have a strong technical skills, or then they might not be aligned to your vision or their behavior doesn't match with your culture, what happens when you feel like it's the time to promote them, not at the senior leadership role, but to any other management role in your company where their behavior will start affecting others and the culture of your organization. So the moment you bring someone in your company, they do affect your culture. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about. And again, for startups who want to really spend some time to explore these ideas of culture and especially employee experience. If you never heard of that, what is the employee experience for the people in your company from the moment you are looking for them onboarding in your team until they exit? If you are interested in that, then check out the interview I had with Darcy Bowles. I think it was a few weeks ago. We put the link in this chat, and she really, really gave up a lot of suggestion on HR for startups, employee experience for startups, and for everybody else that do not work on startups. Now, understanding that, let's now look at what kind of personalities and roles that I need to look at startups. And yes, you heard right. It's not just about the roles that are important. And that's something that people talk a lot about online. It's about roles and also making sure that you have the right personalities or behavior. Just like one of the key phrases of one of the startups where I'm the chief product officer, their key phrase for the HR tech is right people, right role, right fit. And I genuinely believe in that sentence. Again, I believe in their vision, which is why I work with them. But also when it comes to applying that for your own organization, just me as a solo founder and for yourself, whether you're a solo founder or a co-founder. When we start looking at first the behavior aspect, we look at the roles next, but the behavior and the personality types. What should I look out for? Right. This is the bit where you take pen and paper and you start mapping up the key feature, the behavior of your teams, right? Hire for diversity. The more diverse your team is, the better it will be. You hire people that look like you, think like you, behave like you. Great. You are always going to get along. That's for sure. I would say, okay, always, maybe 90% of the time, you will get along. But you will not bring on more creativity, innovation, and any weakness that you might have, other people within the team will also have the same weaknesses, and that will affect you. This is why it's important to hire for diversity, to make sure that if you have a gap somewhere, someone else in the team will kind of pick up where you think that something might drop. In terms of the main criteria to have in a startup, especially when the more early stage you are, the first one is creativity, right? You want to get someone who's an idea maker, creator, the people who can look at something and just like, oh, we could do it this way, that way. So the more the people with creativity that you have, the more, especially early on when you have a lot of other things that's going on, or there are a lot of gaps in your company, then the better it will be for you because they can just come up with a lot of ideas. In addition to creativity, you want to have someone who's also a risk taker. You don't start a business if you don't like risk. You might as well just never start. And every single thing that you do in your company requires a lot of risks as well. So when you have risk takers, you also want to counteract it. You want to have people who are analytical and have a questioning mind. You don't want to take risk for the sake of risk. People who have a lot of ideas, they come up with ideas all of the time. They are risk takers. Sometimes what they lack is the detailed oriented of analyzing that ideas and finding out what could go wrong, how we can tweak it to make sure that we succeed, or how can we de-risk what we want to do. It's not about stopping innovation. It's about making sure that we are innovating in the right way and asking ourselves the right questions to grow. So if as a leader, a startup founder, it's not your key strength to ask those kind of analytical questions, to put things together and trying to find out what could go wrong and we fix it and mitigate it, then get someone in your company that can do that. The last one that you want to have is kind of someone who's very, I call them organizers, right? The kind of people that can be seen as the jack of all trades. They might not be industry experts. They might not be strong when it comes to coming up with a lot of ideas, but they are good at just looking at what is it that you want to do. Oh, guys, we've been growing. The company is growing. We need to have better tools to communicate. Right. We need to do a bit of marketing here and there. I can take that on board. Right. I can see that we are not moving right in this way. I will pick that up. In fact, the best example I have for that is actually my sister. She's like the definition of jack of all trades. She paired up and she's supporting a startup where the founder can be described as a creator, a genius. Is amazing. He has always a lot of ideas and is building the technology. And this, I've looked at what they're doing. It's absolutely amazing. And the reason why they work really well together is because the startup founder is, yes, he has a lot of ideas. Every single time he's doing something, there's something great. He knows, he has a clear vision on how to grow his company. My sister is not in the aviation industry, but she's learned so much working with him. And she's the one who keeps him organized. Every time he has an idea, she will help in terms of de-risking it. Okay, how are we going to do that? We are going to do some testing. We are going to do some simulation. What does it mean? And she asked the right question to start developing a plan and moving the company forward. Oh, by the way, did you remember that we need to go to the investors at this time? Okay, so why are we doing that? The pitch deck is not really good. Let me take some of that, because she knows that if she leave it to the other guy, he will do something, but create people who have a high creativity might not always be the best organizer and detail people. So this is why it's really important to kind of really look into that in terms of when you're making up on your team. And thanks again for the comments that we are getting on live. We've got diversity is very important. How can you ensure that this is at the heart of the organization from the start? Yes. So everything that we've said, from looking at how you are bringing people in your company, and not just the skill set, but also their mindset and how they're thinking and what is missing, will ensure that you are bringing the right people in your company from the beginning so that your company can grow. So thanks again for everybody putting the comments there and the great questions that we are having so far. The second thing you want to look at in your startups, now that you've handled these aspects of personalities and behaviors that will really bring the diversity that you need in your company, let's start looking at the roles. This one is kind of obvious. A lot of people know about that. So I will rattle that through them very quickly. The first one you want to have is a team leader. Even if you have 3 co-founders, you want to know where does the bucket stops, right? You need someone who's a team leader that, even though everybody, they don't need babysitting, their co-founder is still their baby, but it's important to have someone who will understand, making sure that everybody follows around the vision, the team is being supported, and so much more. Sometimes the team leader do play some pseudo HR roles, especially if you don't, early stage, you might not have HR in your company, but they're really also the people that will make sure that the culture of the company and the vision for what it is being implemented. Of course, if you are a tech business or any business, you need a product. So someone looking after your products, whether it's a product manager, a CPO, or a head of product, but you want someone that can also support you with your vision. Of course, you can use other people as interim. You can partner with other organization. If you're the founder, you will, to be honest, it's your idea. So technically, you are the person who knows a lot about the product. But if you are building a software product, then you might want to have someone who also has experience into building software products, so that you bring the product perspective from the industry and the other people bring the technology. The same goes for chief technical officer. Now, this is another great question I've seen online, right? Do people need CTOs or not? CTO is a role that, as a lot of people say, is difficult to hire for. And at the end of the day, when you first start your business, you might not need a CTO full-time in-house, because you will have coders and something like that. So you might want to go for a tech advisor, or someone that kind of take on the role as a part-time role. They can do the strategy for you. They can make sure things are happening, but they are not the one that necessarily coding. If you want someone who's a coder, please hire a coder. Stop doing this thing of hiring a CTO to get them to code, because that is kind of might not be the right fit for what your company needs at the time. The other roles I will mention, of course, as I've said, there's plenty of roles there, but the other roles I thought is worth mentioning today is sales. Sales is, I mean, I'm saying that from a perspective of a tech person, right? I used to be a software engineer. When I started my business, oh my God, sales and business development just blew my mind. And one thing I wasn't even aware of when I first started is that sales doesn't just happen. There's a process around that. You have to have the right processes, the right mindset. You need to have the right structure. And a lot of people think it's something that you can just do in the background. Well, if you are a tech startup, a tech startup with a tech founder, you might be tempted to leave sales way later in the line. So if that is your behavior and this is how you feel, I will highly advise that you find someone on your founding team that has sales experience, so that they can keep their eyes on that. Again, as a founder, of course, we are asked to do quite a lot, but there's sometimes it's good to know the limitation that you have, so that you can find the right people in your team. So this is really the makeup of the team. And you might think, but there's so much more, like finance, marketing, and the rest. Well, when it comes to looking at the roles, first look at what is really, really crucial for you. And I think that will be one of the ones I've mentioned. For the other roles, you can be creative about how you bring them in your company. So for example, one startup that I interviewed live, one thing I love about what they did, they found a lot of advisors, but the way they brought advisors in is by bringing investors. So when they were looking for investment, they were really intentional about looking for investors that would like to take an active role as an advisor. They were not very interested, a few, but they didn't want to have a full set of passive investors and then having to go and look for advisors. So what it means is that the co-founders have different areas that they look at. One of them, although they are both technical, one of them looked after the sales, yet she has the support of a sales advisor that comes in because there was investors, and that really helps them to grow. So doing things like that can help you to bring on more knowledge and expertise in your team. Other things like marketing, you might want to have someone within your team that do the day-to-day of posting, campaign, and things like that. But you might pair up with an agency or an individual that can do your marketing plan, strategy, and things like that. So they're not part of your team at the beginning, but you can tap on them for knowledge. So there are just some ideas on how you can make up your team. And again, there are many freelancers out there, many people that can augment your team. Even when it comes to engineers, that you might not have a developer as your founding team, but you might actually work with someone else that's out there that can help you in like an agency that does your development, but you have a product manager in-house that works with you. So this is something that I'm doing with one of my clients, where I'm the one that's heading the products, making sure that everything works well. And then I manage the engineers. They are based in other countries, so they are building the platform for us. I'm like the translator between the business and the engineering team. So that's another way you can create your team. So now, I guess this gives you some ideas on the creating your team and why it's important to be intentional. Now, again, as I said before, I know that the temptation is to just find the first person that gets through the door and work with them. Sometimes you can't avoid that, but always keep in the back of your mind the kind of skill set that you need from the personality behaviors to bring in the diversity, as well as the roles that you need. Again, for anyone who really enjoyed this and want to find out more, in a few weeks, we will be transcribing this and put this as a blog on my website. So you will be able to go back and really start kind of making sure that everything is more details for you out there, and you can tick the boxes of all of the personality behaviors that I've mentioned, and ask yourself whether you need to bring that kind of energy in your company. Let's look at the last question of the day. Key question that founders are asking themselves when they create a team. So for that one, quick fire round, we're gonna look at 3 questions that comes up a lot. The first one, do I hire generalist or specialist, especially when I'm looking for maybe co-founders or the first founding team? Well, it depends on what you want to go for. One thing to bear in mind, the earliest you are in your journey of your startup, the many things that you need to do, but you might not be able to pay different people to do different jobs. So the more generalist and jack of all trades that you can bring at the early stage, the furthest you will go in your company. Let's take the example of the aviation tech startup that I mentioned earlier. We've got one of the co-founder has a strong technical background, data science, aviation industry, which already tick a lot of boxes. And it's paired up with my sister. She's really good in terms of organization. She has some experience in sales in the past. She has experience in marketing in the past. She has experience in so many other things, project management, and so much more. By the two of them working together, they get to tick a lot of boxes and work just the two, obviously, with other people to support them. And they can do a lot more before thinking about hiring other people. So the further you want to go when you first start up, maybe it's actually worth looking at someone who has a lot of experience. The same happens for myself. I might be a specialist, especially when it comes to software and product management, but at the same time, I'm also a generalist. As I'm a founder, I have experience starting my company, sales, marketing, software, speaking, training, leadership. So any startup I work with at the early stage, they don't just hire me because I can help build their product. They already know that as the team is growing, I will be saying like, do we have the right culture? And I help them build the culture. Do we have the right leaders? I help them build the leaders. And all of that they get in one person. So in a way, having generalists, even if they have a specialism, it's great. And the funny thing was that last week, actually, I was running a startup advisory of a cycling company and all around helping company look at the climate change and how much electricity that we're using. So I'm helping him with his products. And whilst we were talking about product and finding new people to trial his MVP, the prototype that is built, one of the questions I asked him was, by the way, you've been having a lot of discussion with great companies. How are you tracking your sales? And what is your sales process? And his eyes was blank. It's like, sales process. So I had to stop the product advisory role that I'm actually meant to be doing. I'm like, okay, for the next 30 minutes, here's a quick sales process. This is a CRM that you can use. This is what we're going to do. This is how we can use the feedback from one customer to get new customers, and so much more. So in a way, although he wanted a product advisor, but working with someone who also has has a specialism, but also a generalist, gives him quite a lot of information that he didn't have to go find someone else to get him started. Question number 2, should the founders do the work themselves or they just get someone else to do it? And again, it depends on the organization, how much time you have, how are you set up. There is a benefit in understanding some of the work, because one day you will hire people to do that for you. You can't do that for absolutely everything. You might not have the time to become a software engineer. You might as well, hire someone else. But the minimum that you understand, the easiest it will be when you start talking to other people. So this is an approach that I've personally chosen when I started my business. I did everything from scratch. I was doing my marketing, and honestly, when I look back at some of the first posts and videos I put out there, cringe. But it was enough for me to then, understand the process, the challenges, understand my strengths and weaknesses, so that when I hired my social media manager that will actually look after my marketing, I was like, yes, she's awesome, she's superb. I know her strengths, and I know how we balance out with my weaknesses as well. So that's why it's important to know some of the aspects of the role. The third and last point before I go for today, is to bear in mind how much equity and shares that you are giving to people. Early stage startups, especially because it's hard to find people to join you and to convince the first few people, there's this temptation of asking someone, you might not have the money to pay them, so you might ask someone to work for you in exchange of shares. But before you start dishing out shares as if they were hotcakes, please spend the time to work with someone who understands equity investments so that you can plan your shares table so that you understand the shares that you're getting for yourself, for the founding teams, for your co-founders. How much are you leaving behind for investors that will come at different journeys of your startups? And how much are you going to give to employees, the first set of employees and the one that can lead later on? If you are not careful about shares and how to give shares to people, you might actually shoot yourself in the foot. You might end up maybe devaluing some of your company, make it difficult for investors to come later on. And before we go, whenever you bring someone in your company, do think about it as a marriage. Start with a divorce agreement. If today doesn't work out, how do we part ways, right? I'm not saying that you should divorce when you or think about divorce when you get married, but it's important that in a business context, before you go and find a co-founder who will be with you for the next 2 or 3 years, or find someone in the team, you understand the get out clause and what it means to your company, especially when shares and equity are concerned. So here you have it today. For anyone who has any question thinking about this, even if you watch that in replay, do find me on social media, hashtag Athena Leaders, or send me a direct message and I'll be happy to respond directly to you or live. And as I've said before, we've shared a lot of exciting tips and advice on how to bring diversity to your company, how to create a great founding team, and what to bear in mind when you are building your team and think about being intentional about the culture of your company. Everything will be in a blog post for you to enjoy. In the meantime, let's design a happy and productive workplace playground together.